They weren't saints carved in stone. They were warriors who reshaped history with blood, steel, and fear. They marched beneath a sacred symbol, and entire kingdoms trembled before them. El Cid, the mercenary knight of 11th century Iberia, fought not for ideology but for survival, taking contracts from kings, emirs, and nobles alike. His sword became legend, his victories unstoppable, and even after death, his enemies were terrified when his corpse was mounted upon a horse, riding into the battlefield as a final warning. He was ruthless, clever, and unrelenting, a man whose personal code surpassed allegiance to crown or faith. Vlad III of Wallachia, known as the Impaler, ruled with an iron fist during the 15th century, defending his lands from the Ottoman Empire with terror as his weapon. Entire armies froze at the sight of forests of impaled bodies, and his name became synonymous with fear. Yet beneath the horror lay a calculated strategist. He understood that psychological warfare could kill more than steel alone, and he used it to defend his kingdom against invaders far larger than his own forces. His brutality was mirrored only by his cunning, his ability to outmaneuver enemies who had once thought themselves invincible. Jan Žižka of Bohemia was a commander like no other, a man who refused defeat. Losing one eye did not stop him. Losing both did not break him. Blind and feared across Europe, he commanded armies to victory through impeccable strategy and unyielding discipline. His use of wagon forts, creative formations, and the terrain itself turned small, outnumbered forces into unstoppable engines of war. Soldiers whispered about him as a figure who had transcended human limits, a man whose presence on the battlefield inspired absolute loyalty, and who struck terror into the hearts of knights and mercenaries alike. Charlemagne, the Frankish king who would become emperor of a united Europe, reshaped the continent not through diplomacy but through relentless conquest. With sword and fire, he forced pagans and rival kingdoms to submit, erasing entire communities that refused to bend. His campaigns spanned centuries of culture, language, and power, creating borders and institutions that would survive for generations. Charlemagne's armies marched with precision, crushing resistance, seizing cities, and leaving an indelible mark on the map of Europe. He was as political as he was brutal, a ruler whose vision was forged through bloodshed. Belisarius, the last great general of the Eastern Roman Empire, was perhaps the most brilliant strategist of them all. Outnumbered, betrayed, and left with little support, he shattered empires with cunning and discipline. Siege after siege fell under his command. Cities that should have resisted crumbled, and armies that had never known defeat were routed. Yet despite his genius, the very empire he served turned against him. Stripped of wealth, ignored in history, Belisarius died quietly, a testament to the paradox of power. Even the greatest warriors are vulnerable to the whims of politics. These 5 men, each in their own time and place, were instruments of fear, strategy, and unmatched martial skill. They understood that true victory was never just about swords and armor, it was about crushing the spirit of those who would oppose them. El Cid's cunning and survival instincts allowed him to navigate a land torn by war and divided loyalties. Vlad's terror tactics ensured the survival of a small principality against a vast empire. Žižka turned blindness into advantage, proving that genius in warfare could outweigh any physical limitation. Charlemagne reshaped Europe with ruthless efficiency, leaving a legacy that still defines the continent. And Belisarius, even in silence, demonstrated that mastery of strategy can defy numbers and time itself. Their lives were not bound by morality as we understand it. They were bound by survival, ambition, and the imperatives of war. They operated in eras where betrayal was common, loyalty was fleeting, and death was the constant companion of every battlefield. They were feared by enemies and envied by allies. Legends in their lifetimes and myths for centuries after. They showed that power, when wielded decisively and without hesitation, could alter the course of nations and the fate of millions. In their campaigns, every battle, every siege, and every calculated atrocity served a purpose: to secure land, influence, and survival against impossible odds. Their enemies often underestimated them, only to meet defeat in ways both horrifying and absolute. Psychological warfare, tactical innovation, and sheer brutality defined their methods. Yet in their minds, each act was not savagery but necessity, a calculated risk, a statement of dominance, a demonstration of strategy made flesh. Even death could not diminish their impact. El Cid's mounted corpse haunted enemies after his passing. Vlad's name lived on in terror and legend, echoing far beyond his borders. Žižka's innovations in warfare influenced military strategy long after his armies dissolved. Charlemagne's empire endured centuries beyond his life, and Belisarius's campaigns are still studied as models of tactical brilliance. Their legacies are monuments to the darker side of history, a reminder that power and violence, when combined with genius, leave marks that time cannot erase. These warriors shaped history, not by mercy, not by compassion, but by decisive action, innovation, and the unflinching will to win. They remind us that the past is not written solely by kings and priests, but by those who dared to wield the sword without hesitation. Their stories endure because they defy ordinary human limits, challenge moral expectations, and reveal the raw, uncompromising truths of war. They were masters of fear, strategy, and survival, 5 men whose deeds changed the world forever, leaving lessons in power, terror, and tactical brilliance that remain relevant even today.